recorded, and we're finding that there are actually sometimes more people joining and watching through the recording. And so let's just give a little bit of an intro as we launch our fall version of Equip. We're going to have a presenter here in just a moment, but our theme, what we're calling a story arc, is Better Together, City Movement Teams That Work. And we're focusing on what I describe as a citywide leadership team, men and women, leaders that are old and young, with some theological diversity, giving visionary and functional leadership to a city movement. We've had Tim Keller pass, and he's the one that actually framed this language, city gospel movement. Beautiful term. And Tim has really been one of the pioneers of the whole movement of unity in cities. And so we've benefited much from his investment. So our story arc for these next 4 months, Better Together, City Movement Teams That Work. Today, in just a moment, we're going to have a presentation from Matt Andersen. And Matt is Executive Director of Star of Hope Ministries, a nonprofit that does all kinds of wonderful things in New Jersey and beyond. And also, Matt gives leadership to a citywide movement in Patterson. I've been there several times. Actually, we had a couple of remarkable prayer summits in Patterson. And so it's a challenged city, one of the more complex urban environments on the East Coast. And so it's just really heartening to see the body of Christ coming together in that city. So again, welcome for those of you who are dropping in for our fall launch. We'll carry this theme for the next 4 months. And Matt, I just want to hand this over to you. He's going to share some wonderful content on how leaders work together in a city context. So Matt Andersen, Patterson, New Jersey.
Awesome. Well, it's really good to be here with you all. And thank you, Tom, for the chance to share. And as Tom mentioned, with this theme throughout the fall about city movement teams that work, the reality is that if we're going to be serving our cities and we're going to be bringing about transformation in the cities or the communities where we're serving, none of us can do it alone, right? We have to be able to operate within the framework of a team if we really want to see God working the way we all hope he will, right? Part of God's design for us is that we're created for community. We're created to be working together as his church. So it really is an important thing for us. And I want to share with you all, based on that idea, a tool that has been very, very helpful for us at Star of Hope Ministries in Patterson in particular, but even as we look at serving our city and creating a better culture of teamwork and collaboration around our city, I think this model has been very helpful. I know it has been very helpful to me in really just being able to discern and to see the unique gifts and callings of different individuals and organizations and churches in the body of Christ. So, Matt, if you want to go ahead and share that first slide, you can put that up there. The model that we're talking about is referred to as the 6 types of working genius. This is a model created by Patrick Lencioni. He's authored, 15 or 20 books. He has a consulting practice out in the San Francisco Bay Area called the Table Group. But before I get too much into that, I really just want to share briefly a bit of the journey that we've been on in the past 5 or 6 years in Patterson and Star of Hope, and how it kind of leads to where we're at today. For me personally, I've kind of just grown up being obsessed with the idea of teams. I playing basketball at the high school and college levels, and coaching and working with different teams in the work environment and in the ministry environment. I grew up, some of my favorite books to read, even in middle school, were John Wooden and Mike Krzyzewski and some of these great coaches from throughout the years. But If you guys are at all like me, you can maybe think of times when you've been on amazing teams, and potentially other times where you've been a part of somewhat dysfunctional teams. And for us at Star of Hope, uh, this was an important part of the conversation to make sure that our journey started with getting the right people on the bus. So I want to start out this conversation with saying to you, all of these things that I'm about to talk about with the working genius model, none of it works unless you have the right people on the bus. And that's super, super important for us. So, Matt, you can click forward actually 2 slides. We're going to look at the ideal team player here. The game changer for us 6 years ago at Star of Hope was when the Ideal Team Player book by Patrick Lencioni really it changed the way we've operated as an organization. And it's the idea that if we have team players, we can accomplish greater things by just having the right people on the bus. Everything that we're going to talk about today starts with having team players. If you do not have team players, you can forget about all of the working genius stuff because it's not going to work. The question is, though, how do you define a team player? The way Patrick Lencioni defines it is somebody that is humble, hungry, and smart. So, Matt, if you click forward, there's a graphic there. Yeah. And an ideal team player is somebody that has all three of these things. And this is what we look for in our team. The number one thing that we hire for when we put people through an interview process, because we're a nonprofit, we're interviewing, we're hiring. It's the number one thing we look for more so than skills or qualifications, because we can teach a lot of that stuff. But this is sometimes a little bit harder to teach, and it can be very disruptive if somebody is not all of these things. So obviously humble, that means it's got to be somebody that understands that it's not all about them, right? And I like the way C.S. Lewis defines humility, where he says it's not humility is not thinking less of yourself, it's thinking of yourself less. And that's super important anytime we look at a team player. A team player has to be somebody that is hungry. This means that they're driven. They're not slacking off and being lazy or just trying to do the bare minimum, but they're a self-motivated person that is hungry, that wants to do well. And then the third area is somebody that's smart. And somebody that, this is not referring to IQ or intelligence, but it's actually referring to social and emotional intelligence. And an ideal team player is going to be somebody that has that they're in that center area on the diagram there, where they have all three of these things: humble, hungry, and smart. So every hire that we have, every time we're considering somebody and asking them to be a part of the team, this is what we start to look for, because we know this lays the foundation for everything else that can be built on top of this. It's the idea of getting the right people on the bus. And we have found, I think, with great success, that when you have team players, it makes a huge difference. An example for us was when COVID-19 happened in March of 2020. So we had been implementing this ideal team player model for about 3.5 years at that point. And all of a sudden, our entire world got turned upside down. And because we had team players on the bus, we were able to actually serve our city in some very, very remarkable ways. Almost every person on our staff was working outside of their job description. We became a large-scale food distribution organization overnight, and nobody complained. I talked to tons of other leaders around the city, and they were dealing with struggles and issues. And we actually have a team that looks back fondly on those days because we were pulling together and addressing the challenges. And I know from experience that it goes a very, very long way to get the right people on the bus. But that brings us to the next step in the process. which is really what I want to talk about today, which is the working genius model. Once we get the right people on the bus, then the question is, we want to make sure that they are in the right seats on the bus. This is so important. If you get people in the wrong seats, again, it can be disruptive. It can cause things to stall out. You can feel like you are getting stuck as a team. And so, like I said, while we were able to accomplish some remarkable things, there's still times where sometimes teams thrive, sometimes they get stuck. How can we get folks in the right seat on the bus? Let me put it this way. What if we could create a work and ministry culture where not only we have a good team environment, but we have people working in areas that bring them joy and fulfillment? A lot of what we talk about today is going to be about joy and fulfillment. So some questions I would ask you all as leaders, as you work with your team, just some rhetorical questions, but if you want to nod your head even in agreement as I ask these questions, you can feel free to do that on Zoom. Have you ever felt like you've just been stuck with moving something forward, with a project or a program or whatever it might be? Have you ever felt unsure about where certain people fit into the scheme of things? Have you ever been in a meeting? I think everybody's probably going to nod their head to this one. Have you ever been in a meeting and come up with lots of great ideas, but nothing seems to get done? And I think everybody can identify with that one at some point. Or even, is there potentially a decision that you're struggling with right now? And I think that those questions resonate with leaders in all sorts of situations to some degree, maybe not all of them, but some of them. And so my question then would be, well, what if there was a tool that could help us better gain instant understanding of these things, or to help us know what kind of work we should do and what kind of work we should avoid, or if there was a tool to help us learn how our team can get much more done by tapping into all of the different skill sets on the team. And this is where a couple of years ago, we discovered Patrick Lencioni's working genius model, and understanding this model has been transformative for how we do work and how we operate as a team. So what is this model? Is it just another personality test? Some of you, I don't know if you want to even raise your hands, have you ever done a test like a DISC assessment or Enneagram or Myers-Briggs or StrengthsFinder? Those are all really, really great tools. Is this just another one of those things where you can kind of do an assessment and figure out a little bit more about yourself? I do think those are very, very helpful things. This is a little bit different. It's different, I think, because it can offer instant feedback. So I've actually put this challenge out to groups when I've presented about this before, that I pretty much guarantee to people when I present this model that I say in the next 30 minutes, I guarantee that I can make you more self-aware and more others aware, right? That's one of the values of this tool. It can offer instant feedback and better understanding about yourself. It's unique because it not only looks at an individual, but it also looks at how they fit into the makeup of a team. So it really, really comes alive when you have a whole team that can take the assessment and you can map out all of the results for the team and see where everybody fits on that bus. And they can tap into each other's talents in order to be successful. This tool is unique because it helps us understand better how to get things done. So I'll say this before we get into the model. This is it's a model that is really 80% based on productivity, how we get things done, and 20% of it is personality. So that's where it's different from some other assessments. Yes, it taps into our personality, but it's really about how work gets done. And finally, most importantly, I think, is it's not just looking at what you're good at. It's actually tapping into what fuels you, what brings you joy and fulfillment. So I would encourage you as I go through these next six steps of this model, think about it in the framework of this is about productivity as a team. It's 80% productivity, it's 20% personality, but also what are the types of work that bring me joy and fulfillment and energy? Because I think we would all agree, right? Wouldn't we all like to find more joy and fulfillment and energy in our jobs and in our ministry and our home life and in our family? And that's really where the working genius can be helpful to us along the way, and being able to find our areas of joy and fulfillment and things that bring us energy. So I'm going to dive into the model here. There's 6 types of working genius that we're going to go through quickly. And these steps, or these 6 types of working genius, represent 6 steps or 6 activities or 6 types of work that are involved in doing any kind of work. And together they create this model, this process for getting stuff done. And each type of genius contributes to the flow of work, starting with the ideation stage all the way down to the implementation stage. So the first type of genius is what's referred to as the genius of wonder. Somebody that has the working genius of wonder is somebody that loves to speculate and to question things. They're the person that says very, very easily and naturally, they say, why are things this way? Or couldn't they be better? Isn't there a better way to do this? And what happens is in the stages of work, the person with the genius of wonder, they identify the need for improvement or change, and they create the conditions for the next step to happen, which is the genius of invention. So somebody that's wondering, sometimes we don't even think this as an area of genius, but it really, really is. It's much, much needed because they create the environment for invention to happen. A person with the working genius of invention is somebody that loves to come up with new ideas. They are constantly innovating. They love a blank whiteboard. They love to solve problems. They love to come up with new ideas and solutions to solve problems. That's somebody that has the genius of invention. However, sometimes people with invention don't always have the ability to assess if their ideas are actually good ideas. And I know people always laugh at that when I say that, make that comment, because we've all probably experienced that where it's like, oh, there this person goes again. They're coming up with the ideas, but don't they understand that that's not a good idea? Well, what happens is the person with invention sets things up for the genius of discernment. Now, in Christian circles, I always have to say discernment, this is not talking about what we might refer to as spiritual discernment, right? Discernment here is somebody that can take an inventor's ideas and they can evaluate it. And a person with a genius of discernment, they have very good instincts, they have good gut feel, they have good intuition. Sometimes they're very good at connecting dots between various different areas or across a broad range of topics. And often a discerner and an inventor will go back and forth between each other, inventing an idea and assessing it and reinventing it and assessing it until eventually the discerner says, yeah, this is ready to go. This is a good idea. But now, what do? All you have is a good idea. We need somebody that is willing to champion this idea. That's where the genius of galvanizing comes in. I love this genius of galvanizing because I don't have it. The galvanizing genius is somebody that loves to get things moving. They love to get people together and say, this is a great idea. We need everybody on board. Let's do this. They're great at pushing people out of their comfort zones. They get people rallied together around an idea. Galvanizers are essential in this process. But the next step there is the genius of enablement, because galvanizers need somebody that's going to respond to their galvanizing. And this is a person with the genius of enablement. They respond to that rallying call. They know how to help, when to help. They can flex to whatever's needed. Often somebody with the genius of enablement is the person that is most easily identified as a team player, because they're the ones that are just coming constantly and saying, let me know how I can help. How can I help? How can I help? They're also the person that often does not think of themselves as a team player. They don't think of this as a genius. They just think it's something that they naturally do. But there really is a genius around this idea of enablement. Also, I just note, don't think of enablement in the negative sense that we often refer to it. A lot of times in the addiction and recovery world, we talk about enablement. It's a bad thing. We don't want to be enablers. They're using this term in a different way, where enablement is a good thing because it's people that want to come alongside. They want to respond to the galvanizers. They want to help. The last piece of the working genius here, this is what's referred to as the genius of tenacity. The person with a genius of tenacity, they get joy and energy and fulfillment out of driving the project home to completion, finishing things off completely, checking off a box on the to-do list. They're not necessarily responding to the galvanizer. They're responding to the need to get things done. This is the kind of person, and some people laugh when I say this, but often somebody with the genius of tenacity is the person that puts something on a checklist just to get the satisfaction of checking the item off of the checklist. And so they're an integral part of the equation, because they want to drive things home. The last 10 or 20% of whatever project it might be, they're going to get things done. The whole point of all of this is that in order to get things done, all 6 of these activities need to happen, and they need to be present. We need to have people leaning into each of these areas in order to get stuff done. And as we look at our teams, as we look at having teams that work, right? As we look at serving our cities with whether it's a city movement team or a task force or whatever the case may be, a church leadership team, a nonprofit team like ours, we need to have all of these 6 areas of genius working together in order to get stuff done. Now, the interesting thing about this is each of us, and this is as they have, Patrick Lencioni and his group have done assessments on this, each of us has 2 areas of genius, 2 areas of frustration, and 2 areas of what they refer to as competency. So the 2 areas of genius are the areas that come more naturally, but most importantly, they are the areas that feed us and energize us and bring us joy and fulfillment. Those are your areas of genius. I can share from me, my areas of genius very, very clearly are wonder and discernment. That's why I put on my name there on the Zoom screen, WD, because that's my areas of genius, wonder and discernment. So you can already have a little bit of a picture of where my mind is at when it comes to getting work done. I very naturally float towards wonder and discernment. We all also have 2 areas of frustration. These are the areas that don't come as naturally. And most importantly, they're the areas that drain us and deplete us. So for me, those areas are very, very clearly galvanizing and tenacity. That doesn't mean that I can't do them. As a matter of fact, every job is a 6-letter job. We all have to do all of these things at some point in time. But galvanizing and tenacity are two things that really just kind of suck the life out of me. And so what I'm trying to do in my life and in my work is to make sure I'm spending more time in my areas of genius and less time in my areas of frustration. And then the other two areas are what are referred to as the areas of competency. They may not necessarily be draining or frustrating, but they don't come as naturally, and they don't bring us the same level of joy as your areas of genius might bring you. One warning about your areas of competency is these are actually the areas where it's easiest to find yourself burning out sometimes, because it's easier to lean into them because, like, oh, it's not a frustration, but you can find yourself still not having that same level of joy or fulfillment as you need from other areas of work. One way I like to describe this 222 concept is imagine, well, if we're talking about joy and fulfillment and energy, one thing I think of when I think joy, fulfillment, and energy, I think of a cup of coffee, right? A cup of coffee brings all of those things for me. But if you have a coffee cup and you're pouring hot coffee into that coffee cup, your area of genius is like a nice Yeti mug where you're pouring it in there and it's holding that energy and it's staying hot and it fills up all the way to the top. It has that fulfillment to it. But your area of competency is pictured like there's a little hole in the bottom of the cup and you pour it up and yeah, it's still hot for a little bit, but it's leaking out the bottom. It's dripping all over the place and it's not going to stay hot for very long. And it's an area of competency where it's just not quite the same amount of energy. Your area of frustration is like you've got no bottom on that cup. You're pouring coffee in there and it's just dumping out right onto the floor. And that's again, you don't want to waste your good coffee or your energy that way through spending all of your time in your areas of frustration. So I want to pause there real quick for just a second. If there are any questions, I want to invite you to unmute yourself, but I also want to offer this question to you, and then we're actually going to break up into breakout rooms and discuss this in just a minute. But if anybody has any questions, but I'd like to ask, does anybody, after hearing this, think to yourself, I don't even need to take an assessment. I know which one of these areas really resonates with me. Because sometimes in a group like this, there's people that are like, oh yeah, I know that's an area of frustration. I know that that's an area of genius for me. And I'd love to hear that from you, or just take 2 minutes to hear any of your questions at this point.
Well, I took this assessment before, and the revelation it gave me is that since I'm kind of wonder is my thing, it explained why I had so many fights with discerners all my life. I think another thing called them black hats, people who I come up with these great ideas and they're telling me they don't work. And I look at them like the enemy. And now I realize, hey, that's a part of the team to vet the ideas and to admit that I'm going to come up with.
Matthew, could tenacity be considered a closer also?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, they're the one that wants to tie up all the loose ends to kind of close the loop on all of the tasks. Yeah, that's Matt Carpenter on this call right now. Matt's part of our team, and Matt's our tenacity guy. He's got invention and tenacity, and yeah, for sure, he likes to close the loop on all of those things.
Yeah, you really nailed me, Matt, to this thing about just putting something on a list to get the satisfaction to check it off. So when we went through this for our team, our City Advance team, I was clearly tenacity. It both surprised me and didn't, because I just kind of don't give up. I want to kind of see things go through to completion. So it was very helpful for us to go through that as a team.
That's good. So before we break out into our breakout rooms, there's actually times where I've done 4 or 5 hour trainings on this model. I'm not going to go into all of that right now, but there's multiple implications for a team and for an organization on how this can be applied very, very practically for the team. But I just want to share one of them because I think it's actually the most important implication of this working genius model. And Matt, if you could put up the slide on guilt and judgment, because this is, Russ, you were kind of alluding to this already. This is one of those tools that immediately allows us to be more self-aware and move beyond self-guilt or beyond judging others. When people don't understand their own working genius, we often will end up carry unnecessary guilt. It's this idea that, well, how come I can't do tenacity the way somebody else can do tenacity? Or how come I just hate galvanizing? And we carry this guilt. And the beauty of this is it really reveals some of how God has wired each of us uniquely and differently, and created us with this interdependence on each other. And that's so important. So we can actually walk in greater freedom, knowing that if there's an area that I don't naturally enjoy or gravitate to, I don't have to feel guilty about that. This idea of relieving us of guilt, but also relieving us of judgment of others, right? I have the genius of discernment. And so it's very easy for me to say, why can't that person see this, right? What's wrong with them? Why don't they get it? Why don't they understand that this is a terrible idea? It's very easy for me to be judging another person based on my genius or maybe their frustration. And this frees us from that judgment of others, so that imagine if all of our teams eliminated guilt and judgment right off the bat, it would change the dynamics of who we are as leaders and as a ministry, as the church, right? If we could just eliminate those two things. But with that idea of judgment too, if any of you have ever heard of what's referred to as the fundamental attribution error, the fundamental attribution error, it's an idea that it describes our tendency to attribute other people's actions to their character or personality, while we attribute our own behavior to external situational factors outside of our control, right? So in other words, we tend to cut ourselves a break while we hold others 100% accountable for their actions. An example, we might criticize somebody else for being late to a meeting, but we show ourselves an extra special measure of grace when we're 5 minutes late to a meeting, right? It's the fundamental attribution error. We judge others while we provide grace to ourselves. Or if you live in a city that has traffic issues, somebody cuts you off in traffic or they fly by you on the highway, we attribute something to their character because of that. But when we're running late and we cut somebody off, we say, well, I had to, otherwise I was going to miss my turn. Or we provide more grace for ourselves in that way. And this can really help us because we can be providing, or we can be walking with less guilt and less judgment, and we can understand one another better. We can have better self-awareness. We can have better others' awareness. And when it comes to guilt and judgment, I always point people to 1 Corinthians 12, Romans 12. You read those chapters, Paul is addressing this issue with the church in the first century, saying, we've got to realize we're all on the same team together, right? He talks about a multitude of gifts and how we need all of these gifts in the body of Christ. He says in 1 Corinthians 12, don't write each other off. Don't count yourself out. He says if one part suffers, every part suffers. And I'm not going to start preaching here, but you guys get what I'm talking about. we can begin to eliminate this idea of guilt and judgment. So what we're going to do is we're going to break up into some discussion groups, and I want you all to, we're going to take about 10 minutes to discuss as a group a couple of questions. And Matt, you can share this slide with the questions here. First, share what you might think be your area of genius or frustration. There might be one or two of you that have some feedback saying, oh yeah, that's an area of genius or frustration. Where might you see those things playing out in your work? Can you see areas where your genius or your frustration might show up? And where might your teammates see your genius or frustration at work or in ministry? One of the things I love about this is at home too. This applies at home. This has actually, in the last 2 years, this has changed our home life. It has changed my marriage because my wife and I know each other better. We're both WDs, and now we realize like, oh, we've got to operate differently in our home. So we'll give you guys about 8 or 10 minutes to discuss that in your groups, and then we'll come back together and we'll wrap things up with what I think is an important application for city movements as well. So Matt, I think you can go ahead and jump us into groups. Well, welcome back, everybody. I think this is most everybody, if I remember right. But so in the time that we have left, I know, Adam, you had your hand up before, but I'm curious, Adam, if you had a question or if anybody else has a comment or a question or some feedback that you had from your group that may have been helpful at all.
Yeah, I was just thinking about the application to helping city reaching movements, and also just organizationally. I'm guessing that consultants tend to have particular working geniuses, and maybe the leader of a team tends to be a galvanizer or that type of a thing, and so we tend to bring in the same working genius skills, right? But don't move the team forward because where the gaps are is not necessarily where the input's coming. And so I was just curious about that. You bring a genius, a galvanizer, an enabler in, but tenacity is what you really need, and so you're not getting the breakthrough you need. So just curious about that from the not just understanding your team, but when you're interacting right with those from outside who are supposed to help you, and then frustrated because you're not getting what you need.
Yeah, it's interesting when you bring up like a key leader on a team. One of the things that they talk about is that you can usually take their areas of genius and multiply them by 2 because of their role as a key leader. So for me, I have to be aware of that because I will very easily spend too much time in the discerning stage of things with my team and not really equip them with what they need to go through the galvanizing enablement and tenacity on things, or because we all have this natural tendency to gravitate towards our areas of genius. So as key leaders, we have to be aware of that. But and the other response to your comment there, Adam, is if we have an understanding of the stages of work, and they break it down to not just ideation and implementation, but they refer to it as ideation, activation, and implementation. So ideation is WI, activation is DG, and implementation is ET. And the reason why that's important to understand the different stages of work is because there's certain points in time where your genius is not helpful and can be disruptive. So if you are in the implementation stage and all of a sudden an inventor comes in and says, I've got a great idea, guys. And you have all your enablement tenacity people saying, oh, what do we do? And we're pulling our hair out because we've got a huge event in 24 hours and you want to throw a wrench in the whole works with this really, really great idea, right? So I had a boss in the past that used to do that. And I used to pull my hair out because it was like, it's not the time for invention. And Matt has heard me say this with our team sometimes, where it's like, okay, we are in the discerning stage, so we don't have to be writing checklists yet, right? We're still discerning. And some of our team members say, okay, we can hold off on this for now. And they have to learn to kind of control themselves with that. But understanding those stages of work and where you're at in the stages of work can help you understand which genius to lean on and which ones to regulate. Sometimes we have to regulate our own genius so that we're not pushing on it too much. So.
Yeah, just to clarify for everyone, I'm the one that's frustrated in the meetings. I'm not the one inventing
Yes.
tenacity stuff.
Yes. Any other thoughts or comments from your groups at all?
I was
Questions?
just clearly stating at what stage you're at when you have a whole team together, right? Because like with any team, and saying right now we need to be doing this is super helpful for everybody that's in the room. So if you're talking about, you know, city movement groups coming together, if you can clearly identify, hey, this meeting for the first 20 minutes, we're really just going to be doing this, and it's okay to share ideas and come up with thoughts, and then, you know, this is going to be where we hit the discerning stage. We've got to make a decision. Knowing that has helped our team exponentially, and it, for everybody that's in the room, you notice that it's almost like this relief comes off the shoulders of people, simply because you're very, very aware this is what we're doing in this space, and we're going to get to, you know, ultimately the tenacity or whatever that looks like in doling out jobs, and that's very, very helpful in actually getting things done as well. So.
Along those, that's a good comment, Matt. Along those lines, it brings freedom for somebody. So if we're in the invention stage, it brings freedom to the inventor to invent. It also brings freedom to somebody that has that frustration to be able to say, hey, I know what this is. It just brings clarity for them. I know this is inventing time. It's not my strength, but I'm just going to roll with it because that's what it is, right? Or sometimes even just to be able to say to that person, maybe you don't need to be in this part of the meeting, right? Maybe we'll call on you when your genius is needed, or even it might be somebody outside in a different department or a different organization. You say, hey, we need some help with invention. Can you come invent with us for a half an hour? You can lean on and call on certain things at certain times, and it can be super helpful there.
You know, Matt, you took our CAST team, City Advanced Strategic Team, through this, I think maybe about 18 months ago. And as we're hearing this again this morning, we really need to kind of, you know, reconvene and ask that question, where are we in the journey, the process? Some significant changes. And so there's a number of CAST team members right in this meeting here, but I think we need to do that. Maybe have you take point leading us. Okay, where are we now? Okay, and what are those working geniuses that need to step up and step into this? And which of us need to kind of be patient and just, you know, watch and pray.
Yeah, that's right. We can definitely do that. For those of you that haven't seen it before, there's actually, if you get your team assessed, and by the way, anybody can pay to get assessed. It's only a $25 assessment. You can go to workinggenius.com. It takes about 10 or 15 minutes to do. They purposely have kept the cost way down so that they can bring it to more people. I think at this point, over 500,000 people have taken the assessment. But if you have your team assessed, you can actually create a map of your team to show you who has geniuses and frustrations in each of the 6 areas. So it can really help provide clarity there for your team. And along those lines, my wife and I, about 2 years ago, we became certified Working Genius facilitators. So I'm not trying to sell you all on anything, but if there's a way we can help you in your city or in your organization, we're doing that on behalf of Star of Hope Ministries on like a consulting type basis. We can do things in person or via Zoom or whatever, but we'd love to help your team think through that process and some of those implications. So happy to talk further down the road.
Excellent. Any final questions for Matt? We got about 4 minutes before we wrap up.
I have one, if I may. This is my first exposure. And you talked about the three types of work, ideation, and I missed the other two.
Ideation is the first stage. Activation is the second stage. And then implementation is the third stage.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Matt, you want to talk about the article quick? And then
well, let me just mention real quickly regarding city movements, and this is just a thought. This is my unique thought. I've actually brought this to Patrick Lencioni's group, and it kind of didn't compute with them. But I said to I have a theory about this as it relates to city movements, because we can talk about this with individuals and teams. One thing I want to present to you is I actually think that areas of genius can apply to churches and organizations and businesses around your city, right? So an example I would give is in our city, Star of Hope Ministries very much has the genius of galvanizing, enablement, and probably some tenacity as well. That's in the bigger ecosystem of a city. That's a big part of the role that we play, is that galvanizing, enablement type role. But also when we look around a city and we say, hey, who do we need to have on the bus, and how do we get the right people and the right churches and the right organizations on a bus? There might be a church that is very, very good at just tenacity stuff, right? They're on the streets, they're handing out meals, they're doing that tenacity type work. And there's others that want to bring people together, and we can remove guilt and judgment on a citywide scale if we start to look at each other's organizations very differently. So I want to just present that to you all briefly, just to say, don't just make this an individual thing, but we can even look at this as more of a corporate organizational church piece as well, that I think can have some pretty important implications for us around a city.
Cool. Is bureaucracy a genius?
Yeah, Gabe is asking because we live in a government city.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah, I was going to say, Matt, that I like your city church question. You know, how does it work across a citywide church? Lots to think about there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, as we close out, I know Matt has been sharing some, or is going to be sharing some links on the chat there for you, and he's also going to be sending out some of these materials in a follow-up email in the next week. Part of this is as we're looking at our equip calls for the next 4 months. We're focusing on teams, and we want to actually be hearing from some different teams from around North America as well, and learning how teams work and some principles and ideas that have helped them be successful. But we also want people to walk away with tools and resources to take it a next step further, right? So Matt's sharing things like I have a 2-page article that you can download that just describes the whole Working Genius. There's a Working Genius podcast that is super, super helpful just to be able to think through and listen. It's really short 15, 20-minute podcast episodes that dive into some of these implications around this. So I'd encourage you all to be checking some of that out. And if any of you want to reach out to me at any point to have some further conversation, like I said, I'm very passionate about this. We'd love to work with your team in one way, shape, or in some way, shape, or form. And if there's ways that we can support you in your city or a business or whatever it might be, let us know. That's what we're here for. So.
Fantastic, Matt. Matt and Matt Carpenter both. This has been fantastic content. Also want to say this is being recorded. Matt will kind of, process this and get this out to the whole distribution list with resources. And friends, feel free to pass this on to other, leaders and other city movements. this material can be extremely helpful. So we're going to meet again on October 6th, Friday, same time, and continue on the journey of being better together and focusing on city movement teams. So thanks for your time today, and just pray blessing. Let me just close in prayer. Father, thank you for this material. Thank you for just the construct of these different forms of working genius. And would you, Holy Spirit, lead those in this meeting today and those who are watching the recording to apply this and really bring better functionality and productivity to our teams as we move forward in city gospel movements. For your honor and glory. Amen. Have a blessed weekend, and we'll see you in October.
See you, everybody. Have a great day.